Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. We're going to go through today and look at some of the tools that I use the most. We'll kind of go from start to finish, from where I start my leather projects to where I end. So, I'll get this over here a little bit so it's not rolling around. So, the first thing that I have is just a basic cheap scratch awl. These are really versatile. Basically, I use these to mark patterns. Um, you can do holes if you need to like punch through if you're trying to get through thick leather. But if I was going to do that pretty often, I would probably just get like a diamond one. So then I wouldn't have this round hole pushing through. It would actually match my stitch holes. So since I don't do it very often, I just haven't gotten one. But you can use these for a lot of different things. Honestly, there's a lot of household uses and stuff for it too, since it's so narrow and it's got that sharp edge. So then after I do trace my patterns, I obviously need something to cut the leather. So for a while, I was using a little bit more expensive knife. It's a Charter-made blade and a Lindispensable, which it's really nice, but the upkeep and everything for that blade is something that I'm not very good at, so it got a little bit difficult. So here I just have an NT cutter blade. I can't remember what specific blades there are that I have here, but basically, like if you go on Amazon, you can get the NT cutter blade. I think it's NT Cutter Pro is what it's called, and then the blades. It'll actually tell you what the blades are recommended. It actually shows you what blades they recommend for cutting certain materials. So like this one is like for leather and some other thicker materials. So then after I have everything cut and ready to go, if I have really good edges already, I don't sand. But like let's say we have multiple layers, I'll take some sandpaper. I do have some sandpaper here like this. If I need to do a lot of sanding or I'm using a low grit, I'll use my Dremel just because it speeds things up a lot. And then I also have just this cheap block sander pretty much. It's got these detachable little pieces of sandpaper that they just attach with Velcro. So that's really nice, especially because I'm sure most of you who have done leathercraft, if you're sitting here going back and forth with just this thin piece of leather, it's going to start to burn your fingers, which isn't very fun. So you can get the sanding block for really cheap online. Then after I get everything sanded down, obviously you need to clean up your edges. So I just have some Palo Santo edge bevelers. You can use pretty much any edge beveler as long as you keep it nice and sharp. You shouldn't have any issues. I've kind of just updated and upgraded my tools over time, so some of them are a little bit nicer. As far as stitching chisels go for my stitching holes, I guess before we get to that, we'll hit our wing divider here. So wing dividers, basically you set here. This is going to be how far you want your stitch line to be, and then this outside piece will line the outside of the leather. So it'll give you a consistent stitch line all the way through. I was using a normal wing divider before, but I was having issues with the wings were bending a lot. So I got this one. Since it's a little bit thicker, the tension with this knob is a lot better, so there's not so much bend and sway. And it's also a little bit sharper here, so I don't have to press as hard, and it's easier to get a nice little indentation so I can see where I need to stitch my holes. Now we'll hit stitching chisels. So I started off with Weaver. I don't even think they were Weaver. I think they were just cheap off-brand stitching chisels. I ended up going to pricking irons, which I got from Rocky Mountain Leather. I'll grab one of those here. Which they're nice and they make really small holes, but they're technically not intended to punch all the way through the leather, which is a little bit tough because you're supposed to go through this and then you're supposed to take an awl and then actually punch all the holes, which I would prefer not to do. I find it hard to keep the all straight when you're going through leather. Even stitching chisels when you're on thick leather, it gets a little bit tough to keep perpendicular, so you're not going in one side and coming out in a weird angle on the back side. So I've kind of moved away from these. Like I said, they're really clean. They look really nice. Um, Small holes. It also gives more of a slanted look than like these normal stitching chisels do, but it speeds things up. I have a better time punching through leather, and also it also seems easier to actually do your stitching. So you're not piercing one thread when you're coming in on one side and going through, because then that'll just destroy your thread in your saddle stitch. So after we have our holes punched, we have our needles here. I always use the blunt tips, and even these, even though they're blunt, they can definitely poke you. So obviously be careful with that. I think they're magnetic too. I can't remember who they're by. I know a lot of people use them, like John James or something like that. They come in like a little black, white, and yellow package. But these are really nice. I haven't broken any. I just reuse them over and over. Some of them are a little bit bowed, but that's really not an issue. So that's what I use to actually stitch the leather. And depending on where I'm at in the process and like what my projects are, I will sometimes do a little bit of edge burnishing before stitching, but sometimes I do it the opposite way. So I started off with a wood slicker, and that's what I used most of the time. But then it got to the point where when I was using more thin leathers, to be able to actually get a good burnish, it took a really long time with the wood slicker, and the leather would kind of like bend and warp just because of the pressure. So at that point, I moved to just basic canvas, and leather seems to burnish a lot faster that way. Also, I probably should mention this. This is Tokonole. This is what I use to burnish my edges. I did start with Gumtrag or Gum Tragacanth, and it worked pretty well, but Tokonole seems to give me a better seal on the edges, and it gives more of that glassy look. So I basically just have this. I throw it into this little needle tip bottle, mix it with water, so then I can kind of just squeeze a little bit out at a time along each piece that I'm burnishing. So that's been really helpful, prevents waste. And Tokonole is, last time I've only had one. I haven't even gone through the whole thing because of how long it lasts. But it's not cheap from what I remember. So after all that's done, I guess stitching, we missed this. Lately I've just been using a basic, just Bic lighter. For a while I was using a thread zap, but I was running into issues with the little zap pieces or the replacement tips. They would start falling off, and I was replacing batteries a lot, so it's just kind of got to be a hassle. So now I just use this. It's easy. And I don't know, it works better. You can hit both pieces of thread that you need to melt down at once, which is nice. So it kind of speeds things up. But other than that, I think these are the main tools that I use. Obviously, I use glue, so I just have leather glue. Right now, I'm using Siwa leather adhesive, and then I just use some paint, or not paint, but glue applicators. I just reuse them over and over. Even if you have glue that's dried, you can see there's dried glue there. You can just peel it off. It comes off really easily. And a lot of these, especially if you're a new leather crafter, you can get stuff cheap, like NT Cutter's cheap. I think this is like a $5 scratch all. Sandpaper's cheap. You don't need a Dremel. I just got that recently after 2 or 3 years. It just speeds things up. Edgers, you can go cheap. These are already cheap. These are Weaver stitching chisels. I think they're probably around $25. But I also, since my pieces, I have some pretty long stitch runs. I don't want to keep hitting this 6-tooth in over and over. So I actually got on eBay, this is a 10-tooth. I think it's 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, so I got a 10 tooth, and then it also came with 6, 4, 2, and 1, and that was like $12. I had to pay like $12 in shipping, but then I also have this for longer stitch runs just to make sure that everything is perfectly straight. And this is really helpful. You knock out a bunch of holes at once and keep everything consistent. Lighter, obviously cheap. You can get wing dividers anywhere. I just was having issues with the one that I had. I don't think they're probably all like that. Wood burnishers, probably less than $10. You can get canvas pretty much anywhere for cheap. Needles, they're pretty inexpensive. And then you don't need Tokonole. You could use Gumtrag, or you could even use water. As long as you can get a decent, as long as you can get the water on there and get some pretty good friction with the canvas, it should burnish up pretty well. You can also use beeswax. Sometimes I'll finish off with beeswax because then it'll kind of seal up the pores of the leather, and that's good for longevity. It's a little bit waterproofing as well. And I guess the first thing we talked about in the video was this maul that I have not gotten to. So first I started off with a maul that was basically like a hammer. It had the two sides. If you're going to be hitting metal, stitching chisels or pricking irons, you're going to want something like this that's nylon or a rawhide mallet, so then you're not going to be messing up the tops of your chisels, because otherwise they'll kind of round out, and it's not good for the tool. And I think this is like 2 pounds or something like that. This is Barry King. I just wanted a nice one because I realized that's one thing that I will recommend, is if you can go a little bit heavier on your awl, it's pretty helpful because you're not swinging down and a bunch of different angles and things like that. I can pretty much just hold it like this and go straight up and down, so I know that I'm not hitting wonky, and there's enough weight in the head that I can basically just let it do its thing, and it'll knock everything through the leather without any issue. So I think that's pretty much it for what I normally use. Obviously, there are special use cases for other things that I have. I guess I'll show one that I have a lot. And this is just a Japanese skiving knife. I kind of use this for a lot of different things. I'll skive, I'll cut. If I'm doing corners, sometimes I'll use this. I also have like corner knives and things like that that are helpful, but definitely not needed. I'm going to need a straight edge. Everybody has a ruler. If you can, get one that's cork back so it's not sliding all around, because that is not fun. You can also, if you have a metal ruler, you can buy adhesive, non-slip adhesive that you can just throw on the back. So I did that for one of my squares that I have, just because it was sliding a lot on the leather. So now I can use that to get a good 90-degree angle when needed. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any tools that you think I missed, or anything that you prefer to use over what I have here, I'd love to hear it. I'm always trying to learn things. I'm just trying to get some information out there and let people know what I use. Hopefully help some people. And yeah, thanks for watching.